Hello and welcome to the third video in my series for Autside, and the third video will be Autistic Parenting. So the first one was Autism and Communication or Autistic Communication, and the second was Autistic Marriage. So the first bit I'm going to talk about is really everything that led up to me having children, and that includes how I felt about having children when I was younger, and how we both came to the decision that we wanted to start a family. So growing up, I think I mentioned this in the Autistic Marriage podcast, that I had pretty poor luck, is a polite way of saying it, with previous relationships. And for a very long time, I never really felt like I'd find anybody that I'd trust enough to have children with. My friends will vouch for the fact that I was very accepting of my fate, and what I thought my fate was potentially having a sperm donor or not having any children at all. Um, I think it's quite a complex issue to address. I think that's a video in itself, really, of why I felt like that. But I had poor luck. Basically, I was undiagnosed as well, so I didn't really understand how I worked. I didn't have much confidence in myself and my own abilities. And I hadn't really experienced trust and a deep relationship. So I was pretty content that that's what I was going to do. I think even some of my family were expecting that. Some of my aunties were pretty resigned to the fact that I was never having children. They were fine with that. Um, so as I mentioned in the last video, I met Richard on match.com, and things went really well. We were both undiagnosed autistic people, and now we are formally diagnosed. So we've kind of grown together with our diagnosis and understanding who we are, but we've also grown together as people, as a couple, and eventually as parents. So when we first got together, we both kind of, addressed each other as in, yeah, you seem really great. I don't know what I want yet. And for us both to feel so good about being honest and open about, not being sure about what we wanted, we took our time and we had lots of long conversations about what ifs. What if we never feel ready? What does ready mean? How will we raise our children? What kind of values do we want to teach them? Where will we raise our children? So everything from practicalities to, the more spiritual stuff even. So as I mentioned in the last video, my husband was diagnosed with Asperger's around about 2014 as part of his getting ready to become a parent kind of deal. He just wanted to understand himself a bit better so he could be a better father. And that was one of the best things we've ever done, really, and that led to my diagnosis. But in terms of having children, we were both a bit unsure at the start about what we wanted, what we didn't want. And I can't remember what the tipping point was. Obviously we'd lived together for a couple of years and we were very happy and felt very safe with each other. So I can't remember if there was, some little ignition that meant that, we definitely want to have children now. But we started trying, let me think, it would have been around New Year's Eve 2013, so the end of 2013. And I fell pregnant on our first month of trying, and I had very faint lines on a pregnancy test, a very sketchy digital answer that I wasn't quite sure. At this time of the year as well, I was living up in the valleys and it was snowing. So it was difficult to get a pregnancy test. There wasn't, a shop around the corner, so my husband trudged all the way in the snow to get a bus to get into town to get a pregnancy test to give us some answers, because, like most autistic people, we struggle with grey areas, but like most people trying for a baby, it's stressful. The unknown is really stressful. So he trudged all the way in the snow to get a pregnancy test, and it came back pregnant. So very happy. Maybe not all of our family was ecstatic, but many of them were. We were unmarried at this point. We didn't feel like marriage was something that we were really into, but we knew we were committed to each other, for life. So I got that pregnancy test, that positive reading, and I think I had a little blanket given to me, and I had a very strange feeling that something wasn't right, like an underlying anxiety, a panic. I don't know if I can do the description justice of how that felt. I mean, I was excited, but I felt very anxious. Like, yeah, I think unless you've been through a miscarriage, you can't really explain that very well. And I'm obviously not doing a good job, but so I didn't really have any signs. I didn't feel strongly pregnant. I felt quite strange. And I had some cramping early on, which, many could say is implantation, and it's just your uterus growing. So I booked in with a midwifery appointment, and when I started spotting, I took myself to A&E, and I remember the woman in the emergency department doing a DIP pregnancy test and saying, "Okay, you do know you're pregnant." And I said, "Yeah, of course, it's why I'm here, is because I'm spotting and I'm really scared. I want to see what's going on." And she said, "Well, it's too late now." And I'll never forget that feeling of being really angry, because I thought, it's too late. Like, the thing I want most in the world is hanging in the balance, and you're making jokes. I know she was trying to make light because she could see that I was really stressed. And, current me will understand that. But me at the time, it was my whole world, and I didn't know if it was going to end, It's really stressful. I remember the subsequent tests as well. So an ultrasound, I remember that being very stressful. I remember the words failed pregnancy ringing in my ears and feeling like that's that's not quite right. I haven't failed anyone. This baby hasn't failed anyone. So of course, as you know from my previous videos, I do get stuck on language and making sense of language. And I was back and forth to the hospital getting HCG tests to find out how healthily they were increasing, and therefore how healthily the pregnancy was continuing. And it soon became apparent, after days of waiting by the phone and Googling HCG levels and writing it all down on a notepad by the side of the phone, it soon became apparent that, the pregnancy wasn't viable and it wasn't going to continue. So I kind of holed up in our little cushy little Bali's house and waited for the inevitable to happen, for that pregnancy to end. And it was an incredibly painful thing physically, but mentally as well. At that time, one of my closest friends from nursery, we go way back. I know you are. Her little girl, her first child, was turning 1, and I went to the birthday party just to celebrate this beautiful child. And my friends were making this amazing baby, but while I was there, I was in the process of miscarrying. And I'll never forget that kind of, wanting so much to be the one celebrating that first birthday and not knowing if it was ever going to happen. But also not wanting to show that on my face either, and kind of being a parent, but not being a parent as well. It was huge. I mean, the whole process was huge, and it definitely changed something in our relationship. So when we were in the emergency department and they were checking for ectopic pregnancy and stuff, we were concerned that because we were an unmarried couple, that we wouldn't have a say in my care, or my now husband wouldn't have a say in what happens to me or any potential baby. So that's was a major reason why we got married, really. We wanted to lock it down and, make sure we've got a certificate to show for it. And we wanted to protect ourselves legally, basically. So that's why we got married. And when we got married, I was 10 weeks pregnant with my first child. We would call him a hidney bean, kind of like kidney bean, but hidney, because he was definitely in there. He was in my stomach, and I was exhausted and I was boiling. But he was definitely there, and I felt quite different with that pregnancy too. And that pregnancy progressed. One of the things that happened was I developed gestational diabetes. Now, this turns out to happen on both my pregnancies that went to full term. I found out around 16 weeks, I think. But I remember reporting the changes I was feeling, the symptoms of what I had researched as gestational diabetes, really quite early on, definitely before 12 weeks. and the midwife saying, okay, well, we have a protocol for this and we can't test for it this early, and I'm pretty sure you can't be feeling these symptoms yet. And I definitely was. I remember feeling pregnant, feeling my uterus change and feeling full almost. I felt that way sooner than anything Google could tell me. Um, I felt, the way I was explaining it, like someone was setting up camp in my uterus. And it was the same with gestational diabetes. And that was something that in both my pregnancies was really difficult because it's one thing to say when you're not pregnant that, you know, you've got this type of diabetes, you can control it by diet, exercise, metformin. You can, sometimes reverse it with lifestyle changes. But having the pressure of if you eat X and you don't do Y, your baby is at serious risk of harm. And that was devastating to me. And I remember becoming obsessed over my bloods, obsessed over the readings and keeping my numbers down and taking as little metformin as I could get away with because I was terrified of going on insulin because I would have felt like I was failing, which it's all, your body's going to do what your body's going to do. I wish I'd had the confidence to know that, but I started getting obsessed with numbers and food, and it's something that only in the past couple of years, 2019 maybe, that I feel like I've truly gotten over that fear of sugar, because it's not just I want to feel healthy, I want to get off caffeine, I want to sort my diet out a bit. That fear of sugar and overeating was, if you do that, your baby's going to get harmed. So that really did a number on me, to be honest. But baby turned out perfectly, baby number one. And I had an emergency C-section that was quite traumatic for my husband, and he didn't feel like he could be present for birth number two. But luckily, my sister-in-law trained as a midwife, and she's autistic too, so she was literally the perfect person I could have with me. So I had quite a traumatic first birth, ending in an elective C-section. And one of the things that happened there, I think I've discussed this in a blog post or previous Outcast, where I mentioned that the midwife tied the buzzer when you're in hospital, you can't get up. So I'd had a C-section. I'd literally, been cut in half. I couldn't get up. And they'd only given me paracetamol. And the baby was crying and starving. And I couldn't get to him. I couldn't press the button. He was screaming, starving right next to me, and I couldn't get up. And to this day, I can't go on nights out. I can't go and have a drink and relax. My kids have never slept out. I've got a 6.5-year-old and a 3-year-old. They've never slept out away from this house because I still have this severe attachment trauma where if I can't, because of the buzzer behind the bed and I couldn't get to him, and that just cemented something in my head. And if I can't get to him, the stress is unbelievable. But it's something I'm working on as they're getting older. I don't quite know how to remedy that myself. Maybe I could speak to someone about it. But yeah, it's maybe easing a bit as they get older. So that kind of leads on a bit to my parenting style. So, judging by what I just said, you could say that I'm quite an attached parent. And this sometimes can come as a surprise to some people that autistic parents can be attached and loving parents. And if you're that person, I hope this video changes your mind. It's quite strange to have your neurotype used as a prism through which people judge your parenting. And of course, nobody should judge another parent, but it happens. It happens on the school run, it happens with a midwife when you're pregnant, it happens with your family, it happens with people looking at you in the street. Judgment. And I've always felt like I've had to prove something to someone. Now, don't get me wrong, I know a lot of mums feel this. But one of the early things I felt pressure about was pressure to socialise, especially with newborn groups. So I attended one group. It was some sort of peer-led support session for breastfeeding mothers, because initially I'd had quite a hard journey with breastfeeding. I'd had an emergency C-section, and I think the midwife helped him latch on when we were in hospital. But I was having trouble with the right hold and the right latch and this, that, and the other. Um, when I asked the midwife the day after I got back from hospital with a fresh little baby, I asked her for some help and she said, "Well, he's already had a bottle now, hasn't he?" I said, "Yeah, he has, but I really want to breastfeed." And she said, "Oh no, well, once he's had a bottle, it's cruel to confuse him and give him breastfeed." And that broke me. If you do that, you're being cruel to this tiny little person. And for 6 weeks, I expressed, and he used to. This is the reason he's got the nickname Chicken, is that he was so desperate to latch on that he would peck across our shoulders like a little chicken, and that's why we call him Chicken. Um, so he was clearly desperate to latch on and attach in that way. And it didn't happen until 6 weeks where I thought, you know what, I'm going to do what's best for my baby, and me. But it was strange to go against a medical professional's advice to breastfeed my child. It was bizarre. But we had a lovely journey with breastfeeding on both my children actually until around about 18 months, 2 years, and they both kind of self-weaned. Um, and I always tell people that, it came to a natural end. It definitely did. The kids decided that they just kind of weren't interested anymore. And I don't know if I would have ever seen an end point. I think I'm always of the idea that you let your children decide. And me and my husband take some level of pride in this, that our children, there's no telling them what to do. Obviously, don't run in front of the road, can you please eat your dinner because you might be hungry later, or. Um, but we are very much of the opinion that our children decide for themselves. So with breastfeeding, they decided when they'd had enough. Um, my eldest, he was non-verbal until he was 18 months old, but I had some seed of hope somewhere that when he felt he was perfect, because I knew his little personality, and I thought when he feels confident that he can speak perfectly because he's quite the perfectionist, um, he would then decide to start speaking. And it's pretty much what happened. But that kind of reflects our parenting style and how we don't let our kids do whatever we want, but we know them and respect them as little people, in their own right. So my husband has taught me and the children actually that politeness should always be a default, but respect is something that's decidedly different. And respect isn't an automatic. Respect, I mean, we were literally talking about this last night. Respect is something that you earn. And manners are free, don't get me wrong, be polite, but we always instill in our children that someone can't automatically demand your respect. And that's something that some parents have had an issue with. Well, I've taught my children a slightly different way, and that's absolutely fine. Your family background is different, your decisions are different. But something that I've seen that mirrors quite a lot my parenting style in terms of seeing our children as autonomous little people, with Catherine Ryan's comedy and her TV series, The Duchess. Now, she's been having a lot of flack recently in the media in terms of, and it's even included in her comedy, where people criticise her for seeing her young daughter as a peer, as somebody that you can talk to. And it absolutely baffles me that it would be any other way, and that you'd have enough time on your hands as a fellow parent to criticise somebody's parenting style. But oh, that's another rant. I'll have another time. So yes, I think being autistic has influenced the way I processed issues in pregnancy. It influenced things giving birth. It influenced, how I felt touched out a lot when I had a newborn and a noise. But but it didn't make me definitely have a deficit. I'm not a worse parent because I have a diagnosis of Asperger's. And the same goes to my husband. I think that we both, like any parents, complement each other. Complement as in, one of us is good at one thing and we switch for whatever benefits the children. And I think to use autism as a reason for judging someone's parenting, or for, accusing them of being a lesser parent or being a paranoid parent, as we see with all these cases of FII, or fictional induced illness. A lot of autistic parents are more likely to be accused of that. What is formerly, it was formerly known as Munchausen's syndrome, or Munchausen's by proxy. I can't remember the term. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of evidence. Shona Murphy at Shona Dave on Twitter does a lot of advocacy about this and helps out a lot of autistic parents who are more likely or have been accused of FII. And to think that a diagnosis about your brain wiring means, to some people, to some medical professional, means that you're a less worthy and a less capable parent is absolutely shocking. Um, so while there are those very serious matters, I hope that my video or my ramblings about being an autistic parent can help you see the human side to being an autistic parent, and not pathologize, something that's quite universal. We're all tired, we all drink too much caffeine, we all find wet wipes in places around the house that we shouldn't, we've all got dirty finger marks on the walls. Um, so we've all got similar battles, and I really hope that, one day those can unite us more than a diagnosis can separate us. So thank you again for listening to me ramble about being an autistic parent. The next segment we have coming up is autism and caring, or being an autistic carer. So again, more of my personal experience, maybe a bit of political rant in it as well. We'll see. I might try and be a bit cautious on that one. But again, thank you so much for watching my videos, and stay tuned for the next one. Bye.